Hey, everybody, it's that time again. Time to live the dream. Welcome to episode number 38, the Pavel Demitra episode. I had to pick a hockey player for Daniel. Not a lot that were 38, Daniel, but we got somebody for you who was pretty good. Daniel Chiarelli, my guest today. He's working right now for Northern News Now in Duluth, Minnesota. Call letters for that are, I don't think I wrote them down. No, I did.
Yep.
KBJR-TV. And Daniel has really been impressing me. Daniel, last time that we talked was when the Florida Panthers had a 3-0 lead in the Stanley Cup final, and we had a great conversation about, wow, how are you going to celebrate? And then they managed to lose the next 3 games, and I thought I jinxed you, but guess what? I know that you got to celebrate a lot once that happened. Thanks for making time with us today to do this.
Of course, Rishi. It's an honor to be on the Living the Dream podcast, and every graduate dreams of being on this one day. I think it means that they're doing the right things out there in the industry, and it's awesome to talk to you again. And yeah, I do look back on that. I'm sure I was in a great mood, up 3-0, and had you called me back when the series was tied, I maybe wouldn't have answered your phone call. So I'm happy with everything the way it worked out. So I'm happy to be here.
So congratulations on your first Stanley Cup. We'll get into later how Daniel actually has worked for the organization. But let's start where it all began. Where did the
Hmm.
dream begin for you?
So yeah, the dream, I mean, like any kid growing up watching sports, I was glued to the television, sitting on the couch next to my dad. I mean, my dad is a sports encyclopedia, and ever since I can remember, going to football games, taking me to my first hockey game in Florida, baseball games, basketball, it really didn't matter. I was kind of glued to his hip and just listened to stories, and he got to see some amazing athletes over his lifetime. Dan Marino, Alonzo Mourning in South Florida, specifically the Miami Hurricanes over their dominating run. So that's kind of where my sports fandom began. The dream to work in sports was a long and winding road to get to that dream. Um, you know, the COVID pandemic really, I think, gave everyone a chance to take a step back and think about what they wanted to do. And I'll never forget me and my dad sitting in a Denny's, shout out to Denny's, for lunch. We sat down at like 12 noon, and he really just straight up asked me, Daniel, if you could have any job in the world, what would you want to do? And I said, I'd love to be between the benches for the Florida Panthers and just talk about hockey, get paid to talk about hockey. And he said, what's stopping you from doing that? And it really made me stop and go, there really isn't a lot stopping me from doing that. And, Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting, those YouTube ads, they do a real good job. And, 18 months later, and I'm doing exactly what me and my dad talked about. Not with the Panthers, but in some capacity, working my way towards that. So I always knew I was sports is in my blood. It's been my passion my whole life. So I always knew I wanted to work in it in some capacity, but being on air, doing broadcasting, and being involved in the production of sports is something I discovered with my dad only a few years ago.
And you're going to see some of the clips of what Daniel's doing now later. And he's really good at what he does. Trust me on that. And he's made a huge name for himself since coming out of our school. But Daniel, you were always like, our top hockey fan, right? And then when I learned, oh, you grew up in South Florida. How does one in South Florida end up being our big hockey fan at our
Yeah.
school when we've got people coming from all over the country?
Yeah, like I said, my dad took me to every sports game imaginable, and I fell in love with hockey. To me, it's the best live sport, comparing it to TV. Just the action, the speed, the intensity, the way the crowd's into it. I just honestly fell in love with it. I like to joke that my mom was born in Canada. She is Canadian. We go to Canada often to visit family. So I joke that it's in my blood a little bit, even though I'm from South Florida. But I'm not really sure. I really just fell in love with the sport, and I love teaching other people about hockey and watching them kind of discover, oh man, this isn't the sport I thought it was. And oh, did you see that crazy hit or that crazy goal, or, Connor Bedard, and they're saying people's names. I love sharing my love of hockey with other people and watching them become fans. So I think being at, Dan Patrick School and having kids, would never do a hockey highlight. Even if you made them do a hockey highlight, they like wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And even throughout my time there, seeing kids start to get more familiar with hockey and comfortable, you never know what door that might open for you in the future. There's, a station that's looking for a guy with hockey experience, and you're like, oh, I never hockey, yeah. It's like, well, they're gonna pick the other person then. So, um, I love it, and it seemed to have my fandom seems to have been rewarded this year with the Panthers winning the cup.
I did the math in my head a little bit, and
Mm,
I was like, I think, the Panthers haven't been around for all that long, but I think they've been around since Daniel was born. So you grew up kind of in the infancy stages of the Panthers to where they are now, and they've been one of the best teams in the league for the last few years. Obviously,
hmm
the best right now, right? They got the
Yeah.
cup. They got to be the best, right? So, how did your growth as becoming a man kind of coincide with the growth of the Florida Panthers over time, your fandom twined in with that?
Yeah. It's funny thinking about the two timelines kind of next to each other. The Panthers were not good when I was growing up. From I want to say 2000, no, from 1996 to 2019, they did not win a playoff series. So, not a big math guy, but it's over 20 years. So, throughout my lifetime, they were very mediocre. They barely made the playoffs. And kind of as you mentioned, as I started to figure out my life and figure out what I wanted to do and kind of narrow it down, it seems the Panthers did the same and started acquiring some free agents and making some trades and hiring the right people. And that is a great great question because I'm now realizing that I feel like I'm finally at a place where I'm doing the job I love. I appreciate you saying I'm really good at it, but I do feel some things come naturally to me. And it's around the same time that the Panthers have reached their kind of the apex of their franchise. Um, so we really are more connected than I thought. Thanks, Rishi.
Hey man, it's gonna be the rest of your life. You got the jersey right behind your shoulder there. So
Yep.
I've seen you wear that jersey many times or one very much like it. So I know
Oh
how
yeah.
deeply ingrained in you it is. And in addition to living pretty close to the arena in Sunrise, the Dolphins facilities are right down the road from you as well.
Yep.
What were the benefits of growing up so close to two professional sports franchises that were just right around the corner?
Yeah, and that's something that was very eye-opening, not only when I went to Full Sail and meeting other students from around the country, but also moving here. I've met a lot of kids from northwestern Wisconsin who have never been to a professional sports game, like never attended. And that's something I kind of not took for granted, but didn't realize the scope of that. Living in South Florida, you have, five, six professional teams. You have college games you can go to. There's just always something going on in the sports world. And I think that kind of instead of just being, I'm just a basketball fan because it's the only team I follow, it really made me a well-rounded sports fan. You have F1 in Miami now, you have golfing events, live events, even sports, outside the normal scope. So I think growing up so close to those professional teams obviously made me a more passionate sports fan, but it also opened my eyes to, it's not just football, it's not just baseball. There's so many things going on that you can kind of get involved with.
What sports did you play as a kid?
So I played football growing up primarily, and then once I hit high school, I kind of bounced around. I played soccer for a couple years, played a little baseball, played 1 year of hockey. So I can say I've played hockey, not very long. That's all. Honestly, that's one of my biggest regrets in life is not continuing to play hockey. But I do know that now I'm up here and I have some spare time in the winter to play like beer league, and I know there's a bunch of other guys that just love to get together and skate. Not a lot of pressure on it. So I'll definitely be doing that. So yeah, a lot of different sports, nothing ever too serious, nothing ever with high school. I'm the guy covering the athletes, not the athlete himself.
There's a guy I know, actually a group of guys I know, and they play recreationally. They have a rec hockey league here in the Tampa area, and they play for what they call as the Stanley Keg. And so they have a keg they like parade around in the ice when they win, and I'm pretty sure that's like the best moment of this guy's life. So
Yeah,
still a lot to work to look forward to if you ever want to get in deep into that rec league hockey there,
for
Daniel. So
sure.
all good with that. But you went to Nova High School, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
Bryce
the
just
lights
went.
went out on you right when I said that. So, but I
Yes, Nova High School. It's actually down the street, not anymore, but it was down the street from the Dolphins practice facility.
well, I saw that one of the people that
Hmm
went there was Autry Denson, who I watched as a kid. He's Notre Dame's all-time leading rusher, and Jeff Garland, who is on Curb Your Enthusiasm, another
Yep.
one. But how did Daniel Chiarelli back in his days in Nova want to make a name for himself?
Mm, that's a great question. I honestly, if you asked Daniel Chiarelli from Nova High School, he would have no idea. Um, I focused a lot on school. It was always a priority of mine to make sure my grades were as good as they were. And I was on the debate team in high school. That was kind of my sport, my extracurricular activity that I did. Ended up being the captain of the debate team my senior year. And I think that experience, and I don't think, I know that that experience helped me become the speaker I am today, the writer I am today, two of my strongest assets here in this job and in life in general. Because I still am a bit of a shy person. It may not seem like it when you see me on air or you have, a conversation with me, but I'm a pretty reserved person, and I credit doing debate, getting in front of, rooms full of people that you don't know, and parents and judges and debating and doing all that. It really opened my world of public speaking. I'm so grateful for it. Um, so I knew I wanted to do something that involved talking and writing and using my strengths. But I had no clue. The first 2 years, not to jump ahead, but going into college, those first 2 years, I maybe changed my major 8, 9, 10 times. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was worried, am I going to get stuck in this one career, in this one major? Or, I'm never going to be able to change. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, you can always change what you're doing at any point in your life. But focusing on high school, I would say the best experience I had was being on the debate team. Just meeting people from around the country, hearing different ideas also, because the type of debate I did, basically before the debate round, you'd flip a coin, and depending on where it landed was what side of the argument you had to debate. So I had to come prepared with both sides ready to go and had to keep my opinions at the door. And I think that also taught me how to take two different sides of an argument and kind of analyze both, be like, okay, they have some good points and they have some good points. And that helps in life too, in general, when you're making a decision. So many crucial things I learned from being on the debate team in high school.
Yeah, it's almost like being like a defensive head coach that knows defense but has to coach offense, and you can
Yep.
use the principles of what you know about defense to maybe give some advice to the offense, right?
Hmm.
But when did the speaking become a little bit less stressful, a little bit more natural? When within that debate sequence did you find your comfort zone?
I would say probably I would say probably after a year. So my sophomore year, me and my partner, because it's a 2v2 debate. So me and my partner found really good chemistry with each other. And I think once we started having success, it kind of fed the idea that, okay, we're doing this the right way. What we're working on and striving towards is working. And it's kind of that cycle where, hey, we're really good at this. And we also enjoy it. And we enjoy it because we're good at it. And we're good at it because we enjoy it. So it's just a cycle that kind of feeds into itself. And I mean, it was great because we got to travel around the country, going to different debate tournaments, and I think not to toot my own horn, but being good at it and winning, debate rounds and tournaments, it kind of fed into that. Like, okay, we're good at this, and let's get better. Let's work on getting better so we can be as best as we can be.
That's Daniel Chiarelli. He's a sports anchor and reporter, and sometimes live commentator for hockey at KBJR-TV in Duluth, Minnesota. And for me, my first job, other than being a paperboy, Daniel, was working at McDonald's. And I learned from that what I didn't want to do. For you, your first job was working for your favorite sports team. And that was while you were still in high school, and probably learned what you did want to do with your life. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so I got to work for the Florida Panthers my junior and senior year of high school. It was my first ever job. I worked for their energy team. So I was the crazy guy in the stands wearing the bright red jumpsuit, shooting the t-shirt gun into the stands, painting people's faces, doing the dance cam, you name it. And it may sound silly, but that is probably the best job I'll ever have because I was a paid fan for my favorite team. But importantly, it taught me working in sports is a legitimate career to have. And that job specifically, like I'm dancing, I'm being silly, but being in the building, being underground the stadium on that lower level where you see the hundreds of people it takes to put on one single NHL game made me realize like, okay, I can work in sports. This is a legitimate career for me. And I had so much fun doing it. That did never at one point did I feel like I was at work. And the old saying goes, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I never worked a day for the Florida Panthers. I just lived life, and it was awesome because my senior year, they made the playoffs for only the second time in my lifetime. So I got to go to all those playoff games for free and be part of the crowd and be part of the energy, just be connected to the team. Felt like I was making a difference with the team and with the community. And that's a feeling I have now with this job that I love so much about this job as well. So, it's part of the Rat Pack. I don't know if we have the time for the story about the Rat Pack, but look it up if you don't know the Rats and the Florida Panthers. But it was an awesome, awesome experience, and it truly made me the person I am today, whether working or just in life.
I think we can hit the Rat Pack for one more question here.
Yeah,
What was your experience with them?
the Rat Pack. Well, I was more saying the name of why it's called the Rat Pack
Oh,
and
okay.
the connection. So 1996, Florida Panthers. It's the year of the rat. First game in Miami Arena, and one of the players kills a rat in the locker room. He then goes out and scores 2 goals. And the goalie in the game afterwards, they're interviewing him, and he said, "Yeah, he scored a rat trick instead of a hat trick because a hat trick's 3 goals. He scored 2." So then every time he would score after that, one plastic rat would hit the ice, then 5, then 20, then 1,000. And the team goes all the way to the Stanley Cup final that year. And it's only their third year as a team. So by the Stanley Cup final, I'm sure everyone has seen how crazy hockey fans get in the playoffs. They would score and the ice would look black because it would just all be plastic rats. They'd have to stop the game. They'd have to get people to come put them in bags. So that tradition, as in sports, wacky traditions stick. And that one has stuck ever. It's still, I mean, people still throw plastic rats on the ice when they win and when they score. So it's awesome. And being part of the Rat Pack was the best job I'll ever have.
I'm glad
until
you're
until, hey, if I call their games one day, that'll probably beat, dancing in the crowd, but it's a high bar to pass.
For sure. Oh, I'm glad you explained it because I never knew why. I knew they
Mhm.
did that, but I didn't know the origin of the story. I remember that year when they were throwing the rats. I remember them making it to the final, but I did not know why. Well, it looks like we got a visual here. What do you
There
got?
we go. There's the rat itself.
Daniel Chiarelli with us talking rats, talking hockey, talking sportscasting. But now,
Yep.
now let's talk about the school you came to before Full Sail. You were a Gator, not a rat,
Yes.
a Gator. What was your experience like at UF?
Yeah, the University of Florida, it was an amazing experience. Looking back on it, I would say that was more of life university than it was academic university. Not to say that I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was kind of taking a bunch of elective classes to try to figure out, what interested me, what didn't interest me, but um it's a big state school, and even coming from South Florida where you're surrounded by a lot of people, it was overwhelming at the beginning, walking into a campus of 50, 60,000 people, and everyone's smart and everyone's accomplished and everyone's been in clubs and everyone's done everything. You kind of feel a little small fish in the giant ocean. And so that took some time to navigate and figure out. I ended up deciding to major in sports management because, as I mentioned, I knew sports was, as long as the word sports was in it, that's what I was interested in. Well, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I wanted it to be in sports. And so I had a job in the ticket office at the University of Florida, selling tickets for, the football team, volleyball team. And I'm grateful I had that job. I liked it at the time, but it taught me that sales is not the job for me. And it's important sometimes to go through experiences that teach you that, I don't like this, and now I know for the future that this is something I don't like. But trying it is the most important thing, always saying yes to opportunities. But it taught me, yeah, I'm too nice of a person to be in sales. I People would be like, "Yeah, I don't want to buy that." I'd be like, "Hey man, I get it." And that
You're
would be
real
it.
nice, not fake nice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Not
And
trying to goad people into doing stuff.
hey, that's why I moved to Minnesota. But
There you go. Minnesota nice. I know that
Ex-
term.
exactly. So yeah, the University of Florida was awesome. I mean, I still to this day think the loudest, well, until last weekend, the Florida Gators football stadium is the loudest sports event I've ever been to. It's probably the most fun I've ever had at a sports event. Um, so just seeing how, the whole town shuts down on a game day and everyone's wearing Gator stuff, and it's Gator dentistry and Gator Mall and Gator tires and Gator gasoline in the city. That spirit, that love of sports was contagious. And I think it further pushed me to the idea that, like, yeah, sports is a legitimate business that you can work in, and it's a respected job and things like that. So, that experience I'm super grateful for. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic hit,
Mm.
I want to say March of my senior year. So I got 3 3/4 of real life college before it all kind of changed. So yeah.
So how did you finish up there? Because I know what we did, but what was it
Mhm.
like at UF finishing your degree? Because I don't know how well they were set up for kind of the online experience. How did that end there?
Yeah, so exactly as you mentioned, it basically was like all your classes are online. Obviously the job I had selling tickets, there were no more tickets to sell, so that job kind of disappeared. So yeah, all my classes were online. I remember that summer, I think I had one single class to finish my degree. So it wasn't too stressful. I walked across my living room with my cap and gown because they did it online. So that was a little upsetting, but I did get to walk it full sail. So that dream was accomplished of walking the stage. So I'm great. It was a little weird at the end, but I'm grateful that it was towards the end. I do feel bad for some students who their entire college experience was kind of under the COVID rules. So yeah.
What was your number one takeaway from sports management that helps you now?
Hmm. The importance of organization and communication, those both of those things. Being organized in life, but also in this industry is so important because it's so quick to, you get an email from someone that's reminding you of something, and there's 80 different things going on, and it's so quick to just forget about an email or forget about, oh, I was supposed to go, to that game at 2:30 today, and da -da. So being organized, and in the world of sports, when you put on an NHL game, the thousands of people and times, and oh, you have to meet this person here. And if one link in that chain of organization is broken, everything can go wrong. And same with communication. We work in an industry of communication, and somehow it still isn't at the top of everyone's mind, but it's so important to communicate with each other, with other people, how you're feeling, what you want in life, what you want out of a job. It's important to say what's on your mind and be heard. And those are two things, sports management specifically, that I really remember them hammering home.
You got that degree. What made you decide to come back and get another one and pursue a different career that's still within sports?
So yeah, like I mentioned, the pandemic I think gave everyone a chance to kind of step back and think about what they were doing. Even though the pandemic, I was a month removed from graduating from UF. It took a lot of convincing. I was very against going back to school. I was ready to, get a job, start making some money, get my own place. I was ready to be an adult. And the pandemic kind of said, "Hold on, Daniel, you maybe have a couple more years until you can do that." And just sitting around, kind of having odd jobs here and there, sitting at home and just really not being happy. And as I mentioned, having those conversations with my dad about what you truly would love to do, like what would make you the happiest. And this isn't a plug. I'm not being paid to say this, but the YouTube ads. I mean, every time I would go on YouTube, it would be Dan Patrick. Hey, you want to start a podcast? You want to be on air? You want to talk about sports? And eventually I'd be like, yeah, Dan Patrick, I do want to do those things. Like, how do I get involved? And we researched it for like a week and kind of thought about if it was something that was feasible. Luckily, being in Florida, it's not too far away. Um, and it was honestly a screw it moment where we went, yeah, let's do it. What's the harm? And it's the best decision I've ever made in my life, hands down.
Well, we're glad you made it too, because it was a lot of fun being with you and being around you, and now seeing you succeed and making a good name for us with what you're doing
Certainly.
in the industry. But you left UF, which you mentioned the atmosphere and the community and all that, and then you came to Full Sail, which is a totally different vibe,
Hmm.
especially when we're still in COVID, right? When you came by, right? So
Hmm.
what was your first impression of kind of that difference in the type of environment you were going to be in?
It it was a massive difference, going from a lecture hall of 300 kids and the professor doesn't even know your name or would not even notice if you were there or not, to my graduating group was five of us. I think it started at 7 or 8 and it ended with five of us. And that one-on-one connection you get with the teacher is unmatched anywhere else. The fact that, Rishi, you know me personally, you don't just know me, as a student, my hopes and dreams, what I'm interested in. And you get that with a variety of teachers from the very first month to, Mike Stinton's class 3, 4 months in, and all the way to Jeff Ratcliffe and you at the end. So it's just that personal experience of these people actually know who I am. They actually care about what I want and what I want to get out of this program. And also, just I found everyone at that school is a diehard sports fan. So it's so easy to just become friends with people. I remember every month new kids would show up and I'd be like, "Hey, my name's Daniel. What's your favorite sports team?" And I'm probably more likely going to remember that you're a Houston Rockets fan than that your name is Jake, because that's at least at the beginning, that's what I'm going to remember. So it was just it's such a small knit family of diehard sports fans who all kind of had the same passion, the same dreams, and we all wanted to see each other succeed. And I think that environment is so conducive to success. And I loved being a part of it and meeting all those people as well.
It's great that you just brought up Mike Stinton because he
Hmm.
was really like the first one who alerted me of your talent because I had seen you around, right? Because you would come to the studio and help out a lot, but I hadn't
Yeah.
like seen you perform. He's like, yeah, he's a pretty good writer. And so I saw something you did for his class. I'm like, oh yeah, he's right. Where did your writing skills start to develop for you? Was it back with debate or was it somewhere else?
Yeah, I would say most likely it'd be back in debate. It's something that I've always found I'm better at conveying my thoughts with words written on a piece of paper than I am audibly. I also think I'm a pretty good editor, so I'm able to write down a lot and then go back to it and kind of workshop it and fine tune it to say exactly what I want. But I would say debate's where the skill started, but I've always loved it too. Like I always have an innate like I can see myself writing a book in the future. It's just something, not because I have these great ideas, but it's something that I just simply enjoy doing. Journaling is something that I started doing pretty recently, just, after a long day, writing down pros and cons, like what you did great today, what you should work on, or I've made lists of, goals for the future, 5, 10, 20 years, just to write it all down. Because sometimes you have so much in your brain and then you write it down, you're like, oh, this isn't as big of a deal as I thought it was. So yeah, that's probably where my writing prowess came from.
There's a lot of creativity in your writing too. How do you come up with your ideas? Let's say now, right? You got to
Mhm.
put together a lead for a game that you just shot or something. How do you make it creative?
So my go-to, I would say that the thing that's always in my back pocket is I always think this might sound selfish and you might not agree. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your opinion. I always think, what would I want to see on television if I was watching myself? And I'm someone who, whenever I'm watching, Sports Center or any sports program, anytime they throw a stat that I'm like, oh wow, that's a crazy stat. So for instance, this past weekend, the Green Bay Packers beat the Tennessee Titans, and it was Green Bay's first ever win in Tennessee. And you sit there and you think, I mean, the Titans haven't been around, they've been around for 20 something years, I want to say. Like, that's a pretty impressive stat. And on the flip side, the Vikings played the Texans. And the Vikings are 6-0 all time against the Texans. They've never lost to the Texans. So when I'm doing my intro or the tease to the sports block, saying one team's never beaten their opponent and one team's never lost to their opponent, find out, what happened, da da da. So I'm always trying to use stats, historical references. Those are the things that make sports interesting for me. And I try every now and again to slip, a joke in there or maybe like a pun just to kind of lift the spirits up a little bit. That's a lot harder than bringing a stat in because a joke gone poorly, it you could tell very quickly.
Well, I like that
Yeah.
strategy overall because I'll be honest with you too. Like probably the majority of the stuff I wrote was to entertain myself. So I
Yeah,
mean, of course I wanted to entertain the audience, but part of it was entertaining me, right?
100%.
What other tips do you have for people that are in our program now, or maybe that are in the industry now, for really maximizing your writing conversationally? Because you mentioned earlier that, yeah, just saying something, you don't feel as confident just saying it, but when you write it and you edit it and you get it perfect, it's good for you. So how do they do that without turning out the lights on anybody?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say give yourself enough time to allow for the editing process. I feel like people sometimes, whether they're writing highlights or on camera stuff, it's the first thing they do. They just write it because they're like, oh, I can write this really quickly. And then I'll do editing and then I'll, fix the audio levels because that takes a while. And I find giving myself enough room to write something down, walk away from it, come back to it, and be like, does this sound like something I would say? And the biggest thing I do, and people would laugh out there, is I'm always reading things out loud because the way they're written on paper does not always translate to the way they sound out loud. So I'm always reading everything I write out loud. I'm having other people read it out loud to hear someone else say it, just to get as many opinions on it as possible. But if I had if I was writing with a pencil and an eraser, the eraser would be gone because I'm always editing, I'm always changing, I'm always making kind of little remarks about what I wrote. So yeah.
Good advice. I like that. There might be a tease for this episode on social media.
Nice.
It's got that kind of a feel to it. That's Daniel
Yeah.
Chiarelli with Northern News Now. He's a sports anchor and reporter, and we're diving into his experience at Full Sail right now, which included another job for a guy who didn't have a lot of jobs until you hit that Panthers job. You certainly
Hmm.
found a lot of them after that. You worked retail for some big sports teams in Orlando, the Magic, Orlando City, and of course the Orlando Solar Bears. Um, how did you enjoy that experience in the midst of everything else you were doing with us and outside of class?
Yeah, so obviously needed a job to support myself and thinking, rather than doing, working at a Target or a McDonald's, no hate to those jobs, but I wanted to work in sports. So like you mentioned, Orlando has so many sports teams and opportunities for sports. And luckily enough, I'm pretty sure it's still run that one company owns all three.
Hmm.
Or when you work for one, you can work for them all if they are so willing to hire you to all three. And so, yeah, I was working in the team shop, making custom jerseys for people, putting things on hangers and working during the game. And that really taught me customer service and how to talk to people when they're coming to you, they're angry, they're upset, they want something fixed, and you didn't do the thing that caused them harm, and you're just there having a good day. And it taught me de-escalation, it taught me communication, taught me just to be positive when you're just not having a good day, but you need to have a smile on your face. And everyone that walks up, hey, how's it going? Let's go Magic. Um, so yeah, and then also just being paid to be around sports, it never to me feels like work because I'm just having a great time. I'm enjoying it. I'm meeting like-minded people who are hardworking but also passionate about sports. And those are the people I love to be around. And those were awesome jobs to have.
Custom jerseys. Now, when I go to a sporting event, that's my favorite thing. This is going to sound odd when I say this.
Hmm.
My favorite thing about going to a live sporting event is seeing the random jerseys people wear. And some of them from 92 years ago, some of them with a player who wasn't very good. So, what was the most random custom jersey that you had to be a part of putting together?
That's a great question. And the thing is, as long as it wasn't a curse word, I mean, we couldn't say no to people if they wanted something on the back of their jersey. Like I remember doing a couple like Big Mama and Big Papa two jerseys, one and one. Um, definitely a couple big dogs, DOG, DOGGGGG. Because it's one price. It's not by the letter. I used to tell people, listen, as long as it fits on the back, I'll put whatever you want on there. And that was great too. Just interacting with sports fans and being able to talk to them and knowing about. And I'm not a big basketball fan either. That job kind of opened my eyes to basketball and um I've kind of become an Orlando Magic fan somewhat because of that job, and I still follow the Solar Bears and yeah, it was awesome.
Well, you got to host our first Full Sail live show, right? So that
Yes.
was a milestone for us that we had never done that type of a show before. And you were chosen to be one of the anchors. What did that mean to you?
That was huge. I know me and Titus Cleveland, another former graduate, we both took a lot of pride in that we were chosen for the very first one, and that it kind of was representing the whole school of Full Sail, and this was going to be used, I don't want to say recruiting, but to show, other people outside the school, like this is what we do here, this is what's going on, this is all the experiences you can get by going here. So we took a lot of pride in that, and I know we worked hard to make sure that it was awesome. And I took it as a big compliment from the staff at Full Sail that you guys had the faith in me, and that you saw enough talent in me to give me that opportunity because I want to say too, I was still maybe I don't really remember the timeline, but I want to say 4 or 5 months away from the end. Like I wasn't in your class yet or in those final classes where you really get um all the kinks wrinkled out and things like that. So I took it as a wow, they really see a lot in me, and I want to prove them right that they chose me for the right reason and represent the school.
How did it feel different than maybe doing an assignment in terms of kind of the scope of what you were doing?
I think it's a lot more similar to anchoring as not a I know as a news anchor because we were tossing to different packages. We had other people in studio, introducing things. So it felt more like we were the conductor of the operation, kind of pointing everyone in the direction, rather than when I'm doing an assignment, it's just me. And if something goes wrong or a package wasn't right or a VO was cut and there's a jump, that's on me. So it's a little scary leaving some things up to other people and kind of taking your hands off and hoping they do it right. But that's kind of what you have to do. And it's that blind faith you have in other people, and that's why communication is important. That's why organization is important. And yeah.
Yeah, that's like what you deal with now every day, right? I mean, like you guys are all a team, and
Yep.
it's not just you responsible for yourself. You got other people that are responsible for you, and you're responsible for them and all that.
hmm
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's something I loved about kind of the operation at Full Sail, where you walk into the studio, and yeah, it's usually one of you guys directing, but the teleprompter is being run by a student, the playback, the switcher, technical producing, the cameras, it's all run by students. So you build that level of trust with other people, where you say, "Hey, I'm relying on you guys so that my assignment goes well." And then on the flip side, when you're behind the scenes running teleprompter, you're like, "I want to make sure I do this well because this is someone else's project." And to build that level of trust as a team is, like you mentioned, something that on an everyday basis goes on in the real world and in this industry.
What were the biggest areas of growth you saw in yourself during your time with us?
I would say my being comfortable in my own skin and knowing that I can convey what I'm thinking to an audience of people and that they would listen. I think at first I thought, if the kid with way too long of a hair and a gross beard gets up in front of a camera and is talking about hockey, who's going to listen to him? Like there's thousands of other people. And I kind of found my way of finding my own style, finding my own way of connecting with people, getting through to an audience. And so yeah, I think that was my biggest growth. And as I mentioned, I was a very shy person. I still think I'm a pretty shy person, and this job forced me to not be like that. It forced me to talk to random people. The amount of interviews I've had to do with people where I'm very nervous beforehand just to even ask them to do an interview, and then afterwards I'm like, that was no big deal. Like I don't know why you get so nervous. So still working on it, but I would say kind of coming out of my shell was the biggest growth.
Part of that is dealing with different personalities too, and you had that in your class. And as you mentioned, that the faces changed a little bit here and there, but for the most part, you had a core group. But how did you adapt as kind of one of a whole at Full Sail, being in this class and this program with all these different personalities and finding your own place within that?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, I think the being a hockey fan was already such a niche thing that kind of gave me my own little stomping ground to dominate. Um, and I think going into a program like that where it's much smaller and everyone the degree you leave with is so focused that a lot of us are applying for the same jobs. Like it's very competitive. But I was lucky enough that my group of classmates, and I see this with other classes that have come and gone, never competitive, very supportive, always willing to help out. Hey, let me watch your demo reel. Hey, I saw this job opening in Minnesota. You should apply for it. And so it never felt competitive. It never felt cutthroat. I honestly felt like I can go to anyone in that program and ask them for help or advice, and they would be willing to drop what they were doing and help me out. And I tried to be that person for everyone else.
Toward the end of your time with us, it was actually in my class. We had some recruiters come in. They were with Gray Television that ended up interviewing everybody in your class for jobs. And,
Mhm.
we do a lot of that kind of stuff, whether it be career fair, job fair, mock interviews, you name it. What did that add to your experience being able to do like a legit interview before you had even graduated?
That was an unbelievable experience that I'm very thankful for because it got me it helped me get this job 100%. I remember the great recruiter, sitting down, kind of asking me what I was interested in, whether I wanted to be on air or off air, is there a region of the country you're looking for? Like it was more of a conversation like this where he was really interested in what my true goals were. And then it was able to say, okay, here's, 7 or 8 jobs. I think you should kind of focus on these. And here's what they're going to ask you. And this one, their news director used to be their sports director, and he would just give me all this information. And I went home literally that day and sat and applied to all those jobs. And one of them was this one. And at the time, I'm thinking, all right, this is kind of a long shot because he does interviews with, he's a recruiter. He travels around the country, does hundreds, if not thousands of interviews. But lucky enough, I applied for that job. It took a little while, but then it ended up working out. So super, super grateful for that opportunity. And anytime you can get practice doing an interview, I would say take it. It doesn't matter if you're currently looking for a job or you're, happy in a job. It's always a skill that needs refining, and it's always a skill that is really important to work on.
All right, we're going to get to that job you've got in just a minute, but one last question about Full Sail. How would you encapsulate your experience there between the classwork and the studio stuff you did and all the extracurricular activities? As a whole, what did being part of our program mean to you?
Honestly, I would not be 1% as successful as I am in my current job without that school. I say on a daily basis, and I'm not kidding, a daily basis. Oh, I remember in this class I did this, and in this class I did this, reminding myself of things I do here. I never felt unprepared. I never felt like, oh, I don't know what this is. Like I always had some sort of background knowledge doing something in this job from Full Sail. And that is, it was an awesome feeling to have. You know, doing my first live shot and thinking about Gordy Hershiser behind me on his phone screaming and, trying to throw me off my game, and then doing a real live shot and being like, okay, I'm comfortable now because I'm not distracted by all this background noise. Um, in your class, making a 5-minute sports block and having it have to be 5 minutes on the dot, timing wise, or we're just gonna, put you in black. That taught me a lot about timing and producing. And there is no safety net. There's no extra 5 seconds for you at the end of the show. Like it'll just cut off. So I use what I learned at Full Sail every single day. Editing, writing, shooting games, on-air stuff, how to dress, I mean, you notice my hair is not as crazy as it once was, and my facial hair is a lot cleaner than it once was. So even those things that I learned in Full Sail, vocal training, having 3 vocal training classes, how to track a package, I can go on and on. I really do use everything I learned at that school every single day.
I did notice the haircut. I
Yeah.
did. I mean, that made you stand out too, right? That your
Yeah.
haircut made you stand out too, but it does. It looks good. It looks very good.
It looks a little more professional mullet, let's say.
Well, you're sitting in your sports office right now. What's it like to be living the dream?
It's unbelievable. It's so awesome. Coming here, it's market 139. And I know to a lot of people, market size. They look at a job and they say, "Oh, it's not market this or market that." I'm in market 139. The amount of experiences and opportunities that I've gotten here is something I would have never even imagined. Because there's 3 colleges here that one of them, the University of Minnesota-Duluth, has a Division I men's and women's hockey team. You have high school sports all year round, baseball, football, hockey, basketball. The Vikings and the Packers, because where Duluth is, we get Minnesota and we get Wisconsin. So you get Vikings, Packers, you get Twins, Brewers, you get Timberwolves, Bucks. You get all the professional teams, a boatload of college teams and high school teams. And I will say, it's almost a hidden gem in the sports world because our coverage area is so big. There's just not a lot of people in that coverage area. So the market size is small, but the stories you get and the schools and the rivalry games and it's more than I ever could have imagined. And also working in a market that small, I get opportunities to do things on air that I think I wouldn't get if I worked somewhere in a bigger market. So kind of starting small has been such an advantage for me. Because listen, I was anchoring on the desk. I want to say 3 or 4 months into the job in the sports office, sometimes you don't get on air for 1 or 2 years. So to get those reps, to get those early experiences, it's just been awesome. And the podcast is very well titled because I am living the dream.
Well, we had a guy that I worked with who always said to me, like, it's not about markets, it's about sports markets. And he would tell our interns that, right? It was like, yeah, this might be market 50, but you're in market 120 and you're covering a lot more big time sports. You're in this small town covering this college team that's in the national championship every year.
Yep.
So that ultimately means more in terms of preparing you for the next level that you may want to reach than just because you're in a bigger market per se. So I
Hmm.
think that's cool. What people may not know is the job you have right now was not your first job where you are. You took a news producer job to get your foot in the door, and it's something that we often, very often, emphasize to people the final month is, look, get your footing in and then make the most of it. That's what you did. So if we're going to use you as the example, give your pitch. This isn't me, guy. This isn't
Hmm.
me. This is Daniel who actually listened to what we said and did it. So Daniel, why am I right?
How much time do we have, Rishi?
We'll make as much time for this answer as
Yeah.
we take for Daniel.
No, I remember originally applying for the sports job and them turning around and saying, "Listen, we're going to go in a different direction, but we do have this morning producing job if you're interested." And I remember talking to you and talking to Gus, and both of you guys instantly were like, "Take the job, Daniel. No questions asked. Get your foot in the door, get in the industry, get to know the lay of the land." So I never visited Duluth before I moved here. I, drove up here, packed my car up and drove up with my dad. It was really a let's just do this, whatever happens, happens. I'm very grateful that I took that producing job because it taught me the foundation of everything I do here. Producing is the foundation. It doesn't matter if you're sports, news, weather, or traffic. Producing in local news is paramount because timing is paramount and understanding timing, understanding the rundown and all the systems they use to build their rundowns. Um, and also an underrated part of having that job was meeting all the people in the news station before I had that on-air job. So they knew how hard of a worker I was. They knew my work ethic. They knew I was willing to help out. And they're thinking if this kid is waking up in negative 30-degree weather at 3 a.m. to produce a morning news show, then I think he's going to be pretty passionate about doing what he actually wants to do once he gets to do it. Um, but yeah, I would say to anyone out there, I know a lot of people see that on-air job and it's the twinkle in their eye. They want to be that star. I would say it's harder to get that job, but also you need the foundation of, producing first. And I'm very grateful that's the route I took because I still see today, when I come to when I come into the office and all right, I have to anchor at 6 o'clock and I'm stacking the show and it's almost it's instinct now. It's not something that I have to work on and get better at. So that just makes my job easier and I think I'm better at my job because of that.
Well, the second half of that is once you took that, then you did something about it and you did get the job that you wanted. So how were you able to stand out enough that they felt confident giving you that opportunity?
Yeah, the timing of it kind of worked out in my favor that the sports office at the time had three people in it, and one of the guys was leaving in October. And, the fall sports season kind of ramps up middle of August. You start doing football previews and all those things. And so the management here was smart enough to realize he was going to leave in October, which is a horrible time to leave. And said, all right, we need to get a new guy in here. And they knew I had kind of planted the seeds out there that I wanted to work in sports. And I think they took a shot in the dark on me, which I'm very grateful for. Because it's not like I did anything on air beforehand. But I think my work ethic, I think having, the anchors of the morning team say, yeah, he's a really hard worker and I trust him and, he's a great writer of scripts and things like that. I think that helped a lot too. Um, and then once I was in the sports office, I was like, listen, Daniel, here's your chance to prove yourself. Like, you need to show everyone what you got and why you're here and why you're passionate about it, why the lights keep going off in the sports office. Um, and yeah, and then I luckily got so many opportunities early because, and I'm sure we're gonna get to this, but um we have our news station, but the company also owns a station called My Nine Sports. So we broadcast the men's and women's hockey games, the men's football games, and the men's and women's basketball games on that channel. And so we are the ones who staff it. So every Saturday that, the hockey team's playing, one of us is over there in between the benches, but one of us has to be here anchoring. And that person that had to be here anchoring was me early on. And it got me so many opportunities to be on air. And I think once they kind of saw me on air, saw me do a package for the first time, saw me do a live shot for the first time, they're like, okay, I think this kid's got it, which I'm grateful that they see that.
Well, it is pretty cool to be able to work somewhere that does the live broadcast too, right? I got to do that in my last job. Jeff Radcliffe got to do that. You get to do that.
Yeah.
What's it like making that transition and then covering these live events, live games, where you're getting this opportunity to be, whether it's on ice reporter or commentator or whatever it is? How is it fun to get those chances to do the live games too?
Yeah, that's probably my favorite part about this job is those experiences, being in between the benches, doing live hits, at random times during the game, a pregame hit, an interview with the coach after a period, interviewing the winning player after the game. I just find that you're so much more involved in the production, in the broadcast of the game. The things you're saying are being heard by the audience, where I do feel like sometimes in local news because you get 3 minutes at the end of the show, and if it's severe weather or there's an election or breaking news, sports kind of gets pushed to the side, where as a live broadcast you have 3 hours of pure sports. And it's an unbelievable experience. I remember the first time I did it, I literally had a pinch me moment where I'm like, am I really standing right here? And it's like, oh yeah, that's the team, and there's the refs, and it was crazy. And um last weekend, me and one of our directors went down to the Vikings game and kind of shot like an as live package on the field after the game. Got to go to the locker room. Like I said, market 139, and I'm in an NFL locker room interviewing, Brian Flores and Andrew Van Ginkel and all these guys. So
Of
the
course, you throw the
opportunity,
dolphin in there.
of course, and so yeah, so all those opportunities are awesome, but the live broadcasting, it's so cool. And I think it opened my eyes to, in terms of the next, job down the road or next career path, things like that. I think live broadcasting is the thing that I find I love the most.
The other benefit to your job is you're getting to cover a lot of hockey,
Oh yeah.
and you might be in the best state to cover hockey that there is in the country. How nice has that been as a bonus for you?
Yeah, that it's like I said, it makes my job easier because I just love it so much. And the hockey rink is legitimately down the street. Like if I stuck my head out the window, I could see it. So we walk over there every week for the press conferences for the men's and women's teams during the week. And then when they're home, I'm either between the benches as the rinkside reporter. I think I'm going to have some opportunities to do color commentating for the women's hockey games this season, or I'm there with a camera in the stands shooting highlights that then I bring back to the station, edit, and do on the 10 p.m. newscast. So it's so much fun. The women's hockey team, by the way, just swept number one ranked Ohio State over the weekend to open their season. So hopefully, uh, national championship aspirations for both the men's and the women's. And also, what I love is the community. When I grew up in South Florida, and you went to a high school basketball game, there was not really a student section. There was parents, there was family, and it just wasn't packed because there's so much to do in South Florida. Why would you go to a high school basketball game on a Tuesday night? No offense. Here in Minnesota, the small towns, I mean, the gyms are sold out for volleyball and basketball and high school hockey. That level of community, that level of, all right, it's game day, the whole town shuts down and everyone walks to the stadium, brings their blankets and their signs. Have fallen in love with that, specifically with hockey. I mean, it's in these people's blood as it is in mine, and it's something that I can relate to them. And it's just awesome that small town vibe of people really care about their sports here, and it's contagious. It makes me want to work harder, and it makes me want to give these people something that they can enjoy on TV as well.
And as you alluded to, you're covering national championship caliber programs in the two hockey teams there. How has their level of excellence inspired you to be great at your job?
Yeah, so they're legendary programs, both the men's and the women's team. The men's head coach, Scott Sandelin, I believe this is his 24th year coaching. So he's someone that I kind of look up to in the world of Duluth sports, that he's the man. He's been here, he's seen everything. Anytime I get to talk to him or interview him, I'm a sponge. I'm just, absorbing all the sports wisdom, all the hockey knowledge that this guy has. Um, and it puts similar to your question about doing Full Sail Live, it puts an added bit of pressure, but it's good pressure because the caliber of what you're doing, the level of work that you need to be at to match the thing you're covering. That's not to say, a Tuesday night high school volleyball game doesn't get my full attention, but comparing that to, Saturday opening night of Bulldogs hockey against North Dakota and the building sold out, it's like, oh, I got to take my game to here now because I got to match the level of what I'm covering. But that only makes you better because it's trial by fire. It forces you to raise your game and to strive for excellence. And that's something I do. Hopefully, that's something that the hockey team does. I think
Yeah,
they do.
I think they do. I think
Yeah.
they do. And you mentioned like the difference in the game, right? Like there's the big time and then there's okay, this is kind of regular season, right?
Yeah.
That's an analogy I like to make in class is that, well, all right, when you start in the business, the speed of the game develops. It's like being a rookie quarterback being thrown out there in the NFL and having to learn on the fly. It takes a little time. The
hmm
speed is faster than it was in college. How have you adjusted to the speed of the game being faster?
Yeah, and you sometimes forget about it because I know once hockey season really starts, we have every Thursday we have a 15 to 20 minute segment of the evening newscast called Thursday Night Face-Off, where we just run through high school hockey games and show standings and scores and updates, and it's awesome. And I know we Thursday night's all high school hockey, and then we'll go to a college game on Friday, and you're sitting there shooting, and you're like, man, I am slow today because the difference in speed is insane. And hockey's one of those sports that you watch it on TV and you're like, okay, they're skating fast, and then you go in person and you're like, oh man, they are flying. And another big difference is women's hockey doesn't have checking. They don't allow hitting in women's hockey. It's a penalty. So it's a lot, the chaos is not as extreme in a women's hockey game. But then you get to a men's game and they are just throwing their bodies around like wrecking balls. And it's so much more intense. And being down there on the rink, like on ice level, you have to have your head on a swivel. We had a game last year. Luckily, it was not me in between the benches, one of my coworkers, but the guy got hit into the bench. And you have his stick flying around, his skate blades are flying around. So you really got to keep your head on a pivot down there. It's just the action's so fast, it's so extreme, and it's a lot of fun.
Coinciding with that, how have you been able to adjust being in the business now and knowing the deadlines are tighter, the expectations are higher, I need to be readier?
Yeah, and that's something that I credit, Full Sail a lot with is obviously those are for grades and this is for like a job security. So there is a little bit more on the line, but you guys didn't hold back in terms of making those deadlines as hard as possible. And if you didn't make deadline, then you don't make it on air. That's the reality of it. And I remember specifically, I'm not sure what class it was, and if it's yours, I apologize. The assignment where we got a list of 10 football games, and it was a
Wow.
map of where they were, and you could only go to three, and you had to pick three and explain why you picked those three. And every Friday, because we have Friday Night Lights, which is our football show, every Friday we sit in here and do that exact thing. We sit there and go, all right, we have 8 games. If you go here and then caught the second half of here, but then you go there, and it's all for that. It's all to hit deadline and um that time management is such an important skill in this industry, also in life, but really in this industry. And it's something that I think I've kind of gotten the swing of the routine here. But it's something you always work on.
Yeah, looks like you're doing great with your board behind you that's
Yeah.
well organized with the code words. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. All right, final big question.
Yeah.
What are your future dreams within this business? You talked about
Mm.
setting your goals. What are they?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I think moving more into the live broadcasting area of doing, color commentating, play-by-play, sideline reporting, just being involved in the broadcast live. But there's still a lot of experiences here that I want to still do that now that I've kind of moved up a peg in the on the totem pole. Um, but yeah, I think thinking about it, as long as I'm working in sports, is in the sports industry, and I have a platform where I can talk about it or write about it or get my thoughts out into the world about it and have people listen, I think I'll be happy. Because I'm coming up on 2 years in Duluth in January, and people have kind of been asking me because there is a lot of turnover in local news and local sports. And people kind of asking, so you thinking about sticking around? You thinking, and I'm like, I'm, I almost just, I'm living the dream. Like I'm
Yeah,
not
sure.
thinking about the future. And when I do, it's all positive things. Like it's all things I want to do, not like, oh, I don't know about this and that. It's all positive. So I also know this industry is all about networking, all about connections you make. You never know who you'd meet. You never know who's going to call you on a random Wednesday and say, hey, I have this opportunity. Are you interested? And that could lead to so many things. So I'm always open to those phone calls, and you never know what's going to happen, but truly enjoying life and enjoying work right now.
There's no need to rush if you're in a good
Yeah,
situation, right? Like you brought it up earlier. People are to talk about market numbers and how fast they move up and all that. That's for lack of a better way to say it, a young person's way of
yeah,
thinking, right? You want what's next. You want what's coming up. You want it now, now, now.
yeah.
Sometimes, if you're in a good situation, you wait until the great opportunity comes, and it sounds like you're doing awesome. So keep up the great work.
Appreciate it.
All right, I like to end with what we call the dream sequence. These are quick answer questions. I'll ask you three of them. You give me your answers off the top of your head. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, I see a replica Stanley Cup behind you there, but if you actually win the Stanley Cup, you're allowed to have your day with the cup. Every player gets his day with the cup. So, what would be your dream day with the Stanley Cup if you ever had that honor?
Well, I'd have to bring it right to my dad. I think me and my dad would share that day with the cup, just because he's the one who made me a hockey fan, and he's the reason that I went to, he pushed me to go to Full Sail and pushed me to take the job in Duluth. So he's been kind of my man, not my manager, but he's been my biggest supporter and my biggest advocate. So I'd spend the day with him and the cup. And I think me and him would make a lot of Italian food and put it in the cup and eat it. Eat maybe spaghetti and meatballs out of it. Maybe then put a dessert in it. So a lot of eating would be happening out of out of the Stanley Cup.
Well, that was very thoughtful to make sure your dad got to enjoy that as well for you.
Yeah.
All right, we'll stay on the hockey theme for the next one. Dream power play lineup. You can put
Oh
five out
man.
on the ice. Who you got?
All right. My defenseman, I gotta go Bobby Orr and Nick Lidstrom. If I don't have Wayne Gretzky playing center, I'm gonna get destroyed. Um, then I'm gonna go Alex Ovechkin on one faceoff dot and Steven Stamkos on the other faceoff dot, because both those guys and their one-timers, I mean, they call them their office. It's Ovechkin's office and Stamkos's office. So put them in their office and just have Gretzky decide who he wants to pass it to. That would those would be my five.
Sounds pretty unstoppable, to be honest
Yeah, that
with
sounds
you.
unfair, honestly.
Hey, they're your picks. You can
Uh,
do what you want with them. All right, finally,
yeah.
Dream Daniel Chiarelli sports event giveaway. So, like, some of these events, they'll have like, oh, we're going to give away a bobblehead or we're going to give away this or that. Something related to you, Daniel Chiarelli giveaway. What would you give the fans?
You said the first thing that popped into my head is a mullet wig.
I thought of that too. With a rat on it,
Yeah,
with a
with a
rat on
maybe a
top.
rat right on the top. On the top.
It's good. Maybe that'll do it.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Good answers. Well done. Well, we got one last question and then we'll wrap things up. But what advice do you have for anybody who wants to kind of follow in your footsteps and live their own dream?
Whew. I would say no dream is ever too big, and never think that you can't do something that you could set your mind to. I was a kid who had no clue what he wanted to do, sitting in his parents' house in South Florida, no prospects, nothing. And I really said, you know what? This is what would make me happy. Doing what I love would make me happy. Working in sports would make me happy. And it was a big commitment to make, and it was a lot of hard work and a lot of long nights. And but you put your nose to the grindstone. And like I said, no dream is too big. If you want to work in sports, if you want to, follow your dreams and do what you're passionate about, there's nothing that can stop you other than yourself. And I think that finding other like-minded people that are, goal-driven, have great work ethic, and are passionate about what they love will only help you as well. And I think my time at the University of Florida made me realize that maybe the people I was surrounding myself weren't the right people. And then on the flip side, going to Full Sail, I was like, all right, these are my people. These are the people I want to be with. And I love that even after graduating, having a relationship with my teachers from Full Sail and my former classmates, me and Scott still talk all the time. He's out in Mississippi and I'm up in Minnesota, both South Florida guys across the country, but we still keep up with each other. So I would say, yeah, I'll say it a third time. No dream is ever too big as long as you believe it and work hard at it.
Well, I'm glad you're happy. You said that word many times during this show, and you can see it on your face and you can hear it in your voice. That's Daniel Chiarelli. We want to thank him for all his time on episode number 38 of the Livin The Dream podcast. This was one to dream about as a host. It was really good. Everybody else, keep on living your dream.